welcome you this morning to Community Church, Unitarian Universalist. It's always wonderful to see new faces. We're so glad you're here. We hope you'll join us for coffee after the service. Isn't there a meeting today? No?
Yes. Yes. Our congregational meeting is immediately following the service.
Right. Are we going to have coffee first or just?
No, we want to go ahead and start the meeting as soon as we can.
Okay, so you who are visitors and non-members are welcome to go into the fellowship hall and have coffee. We will have a congregational meeting. Those of us that are active members of the congregation, and this is a wonderful example of how we how we govern ourselves in this congregation, in all Unitarian Universalist congregations. We have congregational polity, which means we decide for ourselves, not a bureaucracy above us. I'm your worship associate, Reverend Jacqueline. I'm a member of the congregation, and it's a joy to be with you today. Community Church is a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of all beings. Please look to your weekly emails. If you have signed the list, you get Community Matters. I hope that everyone here has signed that little sheet that's in the front. And just give us your email. We're not going to dog you, but we will send you a Community Matters so you know what's going on. We are delighted to welcome to our pulpit, as I have said, Mary Ann today. If you would join me in reading the land acknowledgement on the back of the order of service. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous graveyard on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Godshall. Tribes that lived on this land include Caddo, Natchez, the Choctaw, Teilhard, the Tunica, among others. We recognize that as a result of royal treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. Lizzie Colleen and I are chairs of members of the membership committee, and we are thrilled to have a new member, Rich Wolf, come join us up here.
So, the membership ministry would like to introduce you to the newest member of Unity Church of Unitarian Universalist. New members, would you come forward?
Tina Scott and Marion Lynn King, it is our joy to welcome you into this faith community. Would you like to say a few words to the congregation so they might know you better?
If you want to say just a couple of sentences, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. Tina, do you want to say something?
Sure. My name is Tina Scott. I've been a Unitarian since the 1980s, and I just realized today that it's 50 years. And I just turned 80 a month ago. So I'm going through kind of a big transition in my life. I went from full-time work to part-time work in psychology, and I moved back down to New Orleans from Arkansas about 2021, although I lived in New Orleans most of my life. So I'm just going through kind of a transition like the minister talked about a couple of weeks ago, a between time, and I'm glad to join just to have community support right now. This is kind of rocky time I'm going through. Thank you.
Will you walk together in covenant with the members of Community Church Unitarian Universalist, sharing the joys and responsibilities of membership?
Now, members of Community Church, will you welcome these newest members into this congregation and covenant by including them in your fellowship? If you agree, please answer we will.
We will. Unitarian Universalist membership is a covenanted process that begins with a signature in the membership book, which we have right here. And they will sign. But once the signature is signed, membership is still a gradual progression from lesser to greater commitment and growth. Each member has a crucial role to play, generously participating with their presence, their gifts, and their talents. And the meaning of membership will change over time.
Congregation, would you like to welcome these new members to your beloved Unitarian Universalist community?
We have some opening words.
These opening words are from a collection of mystical and spiritual writings by Pierre, Teilhard. Blessed be you, mighty matter, irresistible march of evolution, reality ever newborn. You, who by constantly shattering our mental categories, force us to go ever further and further in our pursuit of the truth. Blessed be you, universal matter, immeasurable time, boundless ether, triple abyss of stars and atoms and generations.
It's our tradition to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join in singing the words in the order of service.
just a note on this. So there's a little bit of a typo. So as you know, it starts off with imagine there's no heaven. So just take imagine there's no countries it isn't hard to do and put it before nothing to kill or die. Okay? Does that make sense?
Sing out the children.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you here singing. All right, we'll sing the children now.
Thank you.
thrilled we are to see Liz back with us this morning. It's not easy, but we appreciate it. It's a pleasure. I'm not sure who wrote this, not that it matters. Oh, you did. My dear friend, Tom, who died this week. I will miss him greatly. Michelle writes, Jim is home from the hospital and continuing to improve. If you didn't know, he had COVID, and as did Vera. Vera is in a skilled nursing facility temporarily, recovering from COVID and gaining strength every day. So that's a celebration. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. As I just told you, we go, that's how we do our business. We also don't get money from on high. Our members and friends' generosity helps to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. In fact, we can say not helps. Members and friends' generosity does do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community. For giving online, there's a number, look, right at the bottom of the back of your order of service. You can text GIVE to 504-370-2659. Those of you on YouTube and those of you in the congregation, we'll also have an offering basket in which you can make your contributions. We will sing Spirit of Life. We all know that one. Number 123.
Lord.
pretty much expresses a lot about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who I'm going to speak about, kind of how he thought. So this is a reading, and it's called Mr. Teilhard by Jean Houston, remembering an experience she had when she was 14 and 15. And thereafter, for about a year or so, the old gentleman and I would walk together often, several times a week, in City Park in New York. Central Park, sorry. Central Park in New York. He had a long French name, but asked me to call him by the first part of it, which was Mr. Teilhard, as far as I could make out. The walks were magical and full of delight. Not only did Mr. Teilhard seem to have absolutely no self-consciousness, but he was always being seized by wonder and astonishment over the simplest things. He was constantly and literally falling into love. I remember one time when he suddenly fell on his knees, his long Gallic nose raking the ground, and exclaimed to me, "Jean." He didn't call her Jean, he called her Jean, because he was French. "Jean, look at the caterpillar. Ah!" I joined him on the ground to see what had evoked so profound a response that he was seized by the essence of caterpillar. "How beautiful it is," he remarked. "This little green being, with its wonderful, funny little feet, exquisite. Little furry body, little green feet on the road to metamorphosis." He then regarded me with equal delight. "Jean, can you feel yourself to be a caterpillar?" "Oh, yes," I replied, with the baleful knowing of a gangly, pimply-faced teenager. And we'll talk more about that later. So, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, 1881 to 1955. How many of you have heard of him? Oh, a few? Okay, but not that many. And he seems to have been pretty much forgotten, especially in the U.S., but he was considered a great thinker, and one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. It was a remarkable life story. And as I go through his story, you might agree that given his thoughts and his philosophy, that he was at heart a Unitarian Universalist mystic. And those terms are not contradictory, but even though they might sound like it. So my first acquaintance with Teilhard de Chardin, the French Jesuit priest, came in 1959 when I was a sophomore boarding at Ursuline Academy here in New Orleans. I happened upon a little book called Phenomena of Man in the school library, and I was entranced by it as I read it. Evidently the nuns at Ursuline did not know that 2 years earlier the Catholic Church, had forbidden the dissemination of any of his works. And this is the quote: "On December 6, 1957, the Holy Office published a decree that, quote, books of Father Teilhard de Chardin must be withdrawn from the libraries of seminaries and religious institutes. They may not be sold in Catholic bookstores, and they may not be translated into other languages." This decree actually had little or no effect on the publication of his works, because after he passed, his works were published outside of the control of the Catholic Church. So that's why they were around. 5 years later, in 1962, the Vatican placed all of his writings under a monitum, that's Latin for a warning, for quote, dangerous ambiguities and grave errors. To quote further, "The Reverend Fathers of the Holy Office urge all ordinaries, superiors, and rectors to effectively protect, especially the minds of the young, against the dangers of the works of Father Teilhard de Chardin and his followers." The monitum was renewed in 1981, and it's still in place. However, in the last couple of decades or so, several popes, including Pope Francis and other hierarchy in the church, have actually quoted his works and various sermons. So even though it hasn't been lifted, it's sort of, a practice, it has been lifted. But, people are wondering if it will officially be finally lifted by Pope Francis. Who knows? In any event, I am forever grateful to the nuns of Ursuline for not knowing that his books were forbidden to be in their library. He had two concepts which stayed with me, has stayed with me. He believed that man was caught between the infinitely large, the universe, the stars, galaxies, and the infinitely small, and, all the little things, the bacteria, all that. The man was caught in the middle, and it was man's office, I guess you could say, to study all of that. And I love that idea. The other idea, which he called the noosphere, N-O-O-S-P-H-E-R-E, was the great connectedness of all minds. He predicted that eventually all humans would be connected in a sort of overmind, and all knowledge would flow around the world. So of course that was totally insane and an outrageous concept when he proposed it in the early 1900s. One can understand why the church suppressed it. But now we have the internet, we have social media, we have Google, for better or for worse, hopefully more for better than for worse, but both. When I first did an internet search on him, back in January of 1999, there were 2,400 entries, and I thought that was a huge amount. And so in February, when I first proposed to do this talk, I looked him up again, and there were over 3 million entries. I came up with a second. Anyway, Teilhard was, he seemed like a contradiction in a way, a scientist and a man of religious faith. Although his first calling was as a priest, he was also a paleontologist who studied chemistry, physics, botany, and zoology, and had gotten his doctorate in geology. He was thoroughly grounded in the sciences, but he was also a mystic, and he tried to reconcile these two things throughout his life. He was in constant trouble with the Catholic Church, as you can imagine, because of his unorthodox positions, and many have wondered why the Church didn't excommunicate him, but rather let him remain in the priesthood. He came close to it, though, a number of times. He was beginning to write crazy ideas about evolution. He questioned the concept of original sin, and he didn't believe that Adam was the first man. And worse yet, he began to espouse a theory of evolution, especially the evolution of man. But they did not communicate it, and as a result, we have a really fascinating story, a life story. The church forbade him to teach or give lectures altogether, finally. But it was still an aggravation to them, and they really, really wanted to get him out of their hair. So in 1928, at the age of 47, they sent him to China on a paleontological expedition. There, he was involved in one of the great discoveries of all time. They discovered Peking man, an important stage in the evolutionary development of man. So I'm kind of reminded of Reverend Melody's talk a couple weeks ago. On one hand, it might be good, it might be bad. Well, it turned out for the church it was bad, right? And for Teilhard it was good. It was a great discovery. Here's the church has to deal with this again. So now, the church was beyond exasperating him. There was no way that man could be descended by something that resembled an ape. In fact, the church was still deeply embedded or immersed in what is called the Aristotelian concept of a permanent and unchanging earth. This was the time, though, things were beginning to change. These ideas were beginning to be challenged and influenced by the works of Linnaeus and Darwin. Now, Linnaeus is a long time ago, but it started with him in the mid-1700s. He developed the tree of life that we still use today, and it shows the interrelatedness of all animals. Linnaeus, he felt proud of the Catholic Church because he put man, classified as a primate, as totally unacceptable. In those days, humans were considered separate and above all other beings. Linnaeus did not imagine evolution in those days. He couldn't imagine that things would change because nature was considered to be static and unchanging. Even the idea, it's hard to imagine, but even the idea that animals would go extinct was impossible because that would contradict the perfection of God's plan. So the extinct animals lived somewhere else. We just didn't know where they were. 100 years later, Darwin came along, and he began to formulate his theory of evolution. And he wrote his most famous work, The Origin of Species, in 1859, 22 years before Teilhard was born. And then Darwin died in 1882, the year after Teilhard was born. Then in 1953, 2 years before Teilhard's death, Watson and Crick discovered DNA. And we could say the rest is history. Anyway, the song we sang earlier, well, if you can look in your film notes for the Fire, Mist, and Planet. Do you remember the
You
name?
can sing it right now if you want.
Okay. Let's just reverse. Let's just do two.
Just do first two.
No, two page,
343.
First two.
First two, one, two.
Got it.
Go to the 347. Yes. 342. The last phrase in the first chorus was, some call it evolution and others call it God. So Teilhard called it both. He considered evolution to be the ongoing work of God. He said to trust in the slow work of God. He was a prolific writer, which of course aggravated the church. He wrote 11 volumes of scientific writings, 3 books, and more than 200 essays. And he desperately wanted his writings to be preserved, since the church had forbidden the publication of any of his works during his lifetime. So a good friend recommended to him that he write a will and name an executor, which he did. The executor, John Marie Mortier, did a wonderful job, and that's why we have the preservation and publication of all of his works, both philosophical and scientific. In December 1951, he was allowed to accept the research. He was invited, and he was allowed to accept the research post with the Wenner-Gren Anthropology Foundation in New York. In those last 4 years of his life, he actually did several more expeditions. He traveled constantly all over the world, especially to Asia. At that time, he petitioned the church to be able to return to Paris and live, which is where he's from, and the church refused. So he was off to New York in exile. However, in New York, he was enthusiastically accepted. They thought he was great, and he was invited to give lectures and attend forums, etc. Amir Axel, in his book called The Jesuit and the Skull, described Teilhard as a striking figure, tall and handsome, exuding confidence with an air of worldliness. So this was the time that the reading occurred, 1954. And Jean Houston was a 14-year-old girl who was grieving and angry about the divorce, her parents' divorce. And she had read that running would help calm the spirit. And so she took to running. So one day, she was running as fast as she could in Central Park, and she slammed into this elderly gentleman, knocked him down. So she helped him up with many apologies, and they went their way. And a few days later, she was walking her dog, not running as fast as she could, and saw him again, and he recognized her and greeted her and says, "I will walk with you." And that's how it came about that they walked for over a year. They walked together for over a year, and she wrote how delightful he was, how he interacted with people in the park, something he just didn't do in New York even then. And sometimes people joined them, and there was much laughter and joy in his presence. On Holy Thursday, 1955, they walked as usual. The next Tuesday she waited, but he didn't come. For weeks, she waited for him on Tuesday and Thursday, and he didn't come. Many years later, she came across a book that didn't have the cover, and she saw the concept in it seemed oddly familiar. And when she asked to see the cover, she saw a picture of Teilhard, and she realized that was her Mr. Taylor. And he died on Easter Sunday. Ironically, he's buried in the cemetery on the grounds of the Culinary Institute of America. And that's because in those days it was a novitiate, a Jesuit novitiate in the party, and then it became the Culinary Institute. Throughout his life, he never stopped working on his ideas of evolution. He saw no contradiction between his religious faith and his scientific beliefs. But he did come up with some rather mystical ideas to try to reconcile the two. Although he remained faithful and obedient to the church, he kept on writing. And so here's this new concept that he developed, and also new words. He made new words. I had mentioned the overmind earlier. So harmonization. Harmonization. This is the process of man becoming human. Man is a creature that not only knows, but knows that he knows. And this phenomenon seems to have happened in a geological flash. What happened, he asked? Man, as science is able to reconstruct him today, is an animal like the others. Yet, is he not in reality something altogether different? Transhumanism. This is the concept that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. And I think we're well on our way there. Certainly science and technology has changed a lot of things that our simple bodies could do. And then the noosphere, which I mentioned earlier, is that part of the biosphere that is affected by human thought, culture, and knowledge, the point at which mankind developed reasoning and thought leading to all human minds, finally being interconnected and interacting through communication. There would come a time, Teilhard said, when all knowledge was available to all people. And the last one was the omega point, which is a theorized future event in which the entirety of the universe evolves towards the final point of unification. The omega point describes the evolution of our universe. Teilhard said, quote, "Science and philosophy and religion are bound to converge as they draw nearer to the whole." And about love, and it was like overarching idea for him. About love, he said, quote, "Love is the most universal, the most tremendous, and the most mystical of cosmic forces. Love is the primal and universal psychic energy. Love is a sacred reserve of energy. It is like the blood of spiritual evolution." He was progressive in many of his beliefs. That's why I think he was at heart a Unitarian. In a letter to his friend Christophe de Godfrey in 1929, he wrote, "It has sometimes seemed to me that there are 3 weak stones dangerously in the foundation of the modern church. 3 weak stones in the foundation. First, a government that excludes democracy. Second, a priesthood that excludes and minimizes women. Third, a revelation that excludes for the future prophecy. And there's an American Teilhard Association, and quite active evidently, and it explores and shares the insights and cosmic vision of Teilhard through scholarship, artistic expression, and educational programs. In their mission statement, they say, "We affirm and carry forward his reverence for the interrelatedness of all things." Seventh principle, maybe? His call for an expanding evolutionary consciousness, his recognition of the intrinsic value of human effort, his confidence in the power of love, and the implications of his vision for the spiritual, theological, social, political, and environmental health of our world. So there's so much more that I could say about him, but this ends our story for today. So now we have the benediction. I hope I can find. Again, this is a quote from Teilhard. It's from one of his essays called Towards the Future, which he wrote in 1936. Of course, it wasn't published in the early 60s. The day will come when, after harnessing space, the winds, the tides, and gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we shall have discovered fire. So go and discover the fire in your lives. Amen. And we have a song, a close to you. Oh, we have Christine's challenge.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's lovely to have a scientist within the congregation to address these two hard Chardin. Thank you. We will extinguish the chalice as we normally do. If you would read with us in the order of service here, I will extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice here, that it might go gently in our hearts. May it light the path that you lead this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. And we will end with a joyous song 346. Come sing a song with me. And I see our board president already getting ready to leave up here, so stick around.